go with the way that our culture reinforces this Western mindset, then God ends up being just one of those pieces of pie in our life.
Yeah.
If you divide a pie into 8 pieces, or a pizza into 12 pizzas, you kind of have, or maybe you need an extra large pizza with 16 slices, whatever, your life demands. However you divide up your life, God just becomes one of those pieces of pizza.
So true. So true.
This is Unhurried, and I'm your host, Doug Kyle. Life can feel like a race, rushing to the next thing, never time to reflect. But there is incredible value in slowing down with God to take in His perspective, His presence, His pace. How do we balance our spiritual life with the rest of life's demands? I want to suggest that in the end, that might be the wrong way to think about it. This is episode 22 of season 2 of Unhurried. I'm your host, Doug Kyle. Today we want to talk about balancing God with the rest of life. How do you do that? And how the balanced life in the end might be overrated anyway. For the next few episodes now, we're going to be looking at lessons from the desert. Get some sand in our sandals as we look at some of these lessons that the Israelites learned in their travels through the desert, particularly as Moses prepared them to enter the Promised Land. So we're going to be in Deuteronomy, the Old Testament. It'll be great. Welcome to our listeners and viewers. And Ryan, good to have you here as always.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's good to be back.
We have a little more elbow space here. With Amanda was here last week,
That's
your
right.
wife, and man, she did a good job.
She did a great job.
It was so great to have her on.
I thought so too. I thought it was a nice wrap to our series about Job too,
Yes,
and
it
going
was
through
perfect.
that. And we've had so many just great, awesome, church people that have come up to us and got to share their story and stuff and walk through that with them. And it's just been great. It's just been a great response. So
yeah, it was good. So I think she sort of set the bar pretty high for us this week.
I know.
We're like, oh my, what are we going to say? And also she's kind of, I think, gave us the idea that we want to kind of continue to include guests along the way over, the next, as we move forward.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we should kind of plan that out a little bit more. Just to kind of have some guests on, just depending on what our topic is that week and stuff. Having that third voice was nice and a different perspective, and join us in our unhurried conversation. So
exactly. Yeah, it was great. So if you missed it, episode 21 of season 2 is definitely worth catching. It was
most definitely
one of the ones we want to tuck away in our best of episodes for sure. So it struck me, this is episode 22 of season 2. So we got 2.
Right.
The great Dodger sportscaster. What was his name?
I can't. Vin Scully.
Vin Scully.
Yeah.
Vin Scully had a saying. Not that I'm, I think everybody knows I'm a Padre fan, not a Dodger fan, but Vin Scully was a classic, and he used to say if the count was 2 outs, 2 runners on base, it's 2 strikes, 2 balls, he would say deuces wild.
Deuces wild, that's right.
Deuces wild, a bunch of 2s. So we got a bunch of 2s today. There's the 2 of us.
Yep.
And it is season 2, episode 22.
Right.
So hopefully we can make this a good podcast.
A good one.
Following up.
There you go.
So anyway, Unhurried is meant to be like sitting down having a cup of coffee together after a sermon. I heard a brand new listener just this morning.
Oh.
I talked to someone and she said, hey, it doesn't even go to our church. She goes, but she heard that we had a podcast and
nice.
She listened along. So we've got listeners joining us every week. So wherever you are in the process, this is meant to be a time to sort of sit down, have a cup of coffee, talk about some of these, go deeper in some of these topics that we cover often on a Sunday morning, but we in the middle of the week, have a chance to kind of talk, go deeper into the conversation. So thanks for joining us out there. Our merchandise, the Unhurried mugs merch is all gone. Yeah, we talked about that last week. Someone came up to me this Sunday wanting one. And I was like, kind of. Yeah, they're collector items now.
Yeah.
You gotta buy them. Maybe buy them online, or I could sell mine.
I mean, I guess you could.
I could. I could. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of attached to it. So
I know I'm kind of attached to mine too.
Yeah.
I don't have mine on me right now, but I'm kind of attached to mine.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. But we now have the hats, and there's a buzz about these new hats.
Yeah, people have been asking me how they get the hats.
Me too.
Okay.
We have to decide.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, we can keep them, hanging on.
Yeah.
But we have to have something, kind of a cool way to do it.
I think so. So. We'll have to think about it.
All right. So we're not ready to announce that yet.
Right.
Stay tuned, as they say. Stay tuned, and we will keep you focused on that. The listeners' questions for today we'll save to the end, but I did want to say that the balanced life is more overrated. I used to have this app on my phone. I thought, I'm just speaking to myself right now. I usually do.
Sure.
People come up to me. I'm not saying I talk to myself. I'm saying I'm just speaking to myself. That's a little different.
Right.
But people come up to me on Sunday and they'll say, "Man, that really spoke to me." And I said, or they kind of like almost, "Were you trying to,
Right.
They mean it's a compliment,
Right.
but like, how did you know I needed to hear that? I say, I needed to hear it.
Right.
It was really for me.
Right.
So I'm glad you got to listen.
Yeah. I remember you saying that when, Noah, who does all of our graphics and bumpers, videos on Sunday and things like that. I remember he asked you that question one time, that he was like, do you ever, like preach to someone or think of someone while you're preparing a message, and you're like, I just think of myself and what I need to hear.
Yeah.
So, and people get to, grasp onto that, which is cool.
I really feel that way about today's podcast because I am one of these guys that loves multitasking. I love to, balancing my life seems like something I've always been, I thought a lot about. I try to do it. I remember I had this app for a long time, and it was called something like Life Balance or something like that. But it was so complicated. You would put in everything you were trying to do, and it would actually change during different times of the day. As the day changed, your to-do list would change based on how you programmed what you wanted to be focused on during those times of the day.
Wow.
And it was this fluid to-do list that I was just super enamored with. And in the end, it ended up being way too complicated. But this kind of intrigues me, this idea of balancing my life. I think there's something in the Western mindset that we just want so much to have everything perfectly balanced.
Right. Right.
You feel that too, kind of in our culture?
Very much so. I don't feel like any part of my life is balanced right now. But,
it's a longing for it. Maybe it's not happening.
Yes, I long for it. I dream of the days, of those days of having a balanced, life and But I think I'm in a different season right now. With the kids and stuff and.
But I mean, I was that even when our kids were little. I was like, maybe even more so, because then you really feel the tug between family life and work life.
Yes,
that's often the struggle, the balance that people are thinking about.
Yes,
I've talked to a lot of people about that over the years. Like, how do I balance work and family?
Right.
And then if you want to throw church in there too, how do I balance church, work, family, keep all those things together, and it feels like you're juggling, and
very
always
so.
One ball's dropping, or you're spinning plates, and there's always one plate that's about to fall, and it feels like you just can't do it.
Right.
It always feels so overwhelming to try and think about that.
Yeah, there's a funny trend going on right now with like Instagram, and TikTok and things like that, and it's like, it has like. The caption says like what moms worry about and what dads worry about, and so then it's the mom, and she's like, "Hi, I'm the mom, and I'm have to make lunch before we go to soccer practice," and then it'll pan to the dad, and the dad's like, "I'm the dad," and then it cuts back to the mom, and she goes, "And now I have to do laundry," and she keeps on going through like all the things that she has to do, and then it keeps panning back to the dad, and the dad's like, "I'm the dad," but it's funny because now like it's been flipped. Where like in different, people who work from home, or like you have, maybe a stay-at-home dad, it's been like flipped now, where it's like now the dad's going like, "Oh, I have to do this and I have to do this," and the mom's like, "I'm the mom," and it's like, so it goes back and forth, and it's this playful little thing between moms and dads right now, but it's the balance of, they're working together as a team and who gets to handle, what's going on in the house. You know?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that the balance between spouses then, also adds to it. Like,
oh, for sure.
Now it's just not one person trying to balance their life, but two people trying to balance their lives and balance it with each other.
Yeah.
Add some kids in there and it gets even more complicated.
Yeah.
And life, work, home life, church, your spiritual life, all of that. And sometimes I think my quest for being completely balanced is not, it's a little bit this perfectionistic goal that's not only unreasonable or, unrealistic, it's also maybe not even worth pursuing.
Right.
And I want to just come at it from a different way to think about that today.
Yeah.
And it grows out of what we talked about on Sunday. We talked about the, simplifying the spiritual life to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Sheep is what the title was. And it's the idea that in Deuteronomy 6, Moses boils down all the commandments and there's a lot when you're going through Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers.
Right.
We're talking about a lot, hundreds of commandments that cover every aspect of life seemingly. And he boils it down to one single focus. And that focus comes from Deuteronomy 6:5, which says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." And I love this because we know, some of you out there will know that Jesus said that was the greatest commandments. Others will know that Paul said that really captured everything the commandments were trying to convey, especially when you couple that with love your neighbor as yourself. Put those two things together and you've really captured the heart and the goal of all the commandments. But to see that Moses, the great lawgiver, the one who God used to bring all these commandments to his people, also understood that was really, to me, that's eye-opening to realize that this wasn't an afterthought by Paul and ultimately Jesus to say, oh, by the way, here's how we're going to group these all together under one umbrella. Even from the very beginning, that was Moses's heart. That was what he wanted the people of God to understand back then as well, that it came down to loving God. And he mentions three areas: with your heart, with your soul, and with your strength. And I'm immediately, because I'm a balanced guy, I'm thinking, how do we balance your heart, your soul, and your strength? I'm struck by those three areas. That is there something there that tells us that we're supposed to think in terms of loving God with our heart, and then also separately or distinctly with our soul, and then also with our strength? And what does that mean? It gets even more interesting because when you look at the New Testament and the Gospels, when they repeat this commandment from the Old Testament, and Jesus explains, or in conversation with Jesus, they talk about what it means to love God. They quote this, they add a fourth element.
Right.
So it's not just your heart, your soul, and your strength. In Mark and Luke, it's your heart, mind, soul, and strength. So it's all three of those plus throwing in mind, and that, can easily get us going down the rabbit trail of saying, oh, let's think about how now we need to balance that as well. And then Matthew, he limits it to three, sort of like the Old Testament, but it's a different three than the Old Testament. His is heart, soul, and mind, and he leaves strength out. He adds mind, which wasn't in the Old Testament, and he leaves strength out. And we can get intrigued with this because in our Western way of thinking, and kind of what Ryan, you and I have been talking about, we naturally want to think about balancing all these different categories of life, all these different areas. And so those terms come up and we start to think, well, my mental life, my emotional life, my physical life, my spiritual life, and sort of trying to divide it into those categories. And I think I've spent a lot of time in my life thinking that way too, because that's just the way the Western mind operates. But in Hebrew thought, it's not so much about dividing it into categories. And so the way Moses would have thought about this, and quite frankly, the way Jesus would have thought about this in his day, is this was not a way of dividing up or dissecting or, trisecting the human life into all these different categories. Rather, it is just a way of talking about a holistic, all of your life,
right,
your total life.
right,
It's not sharply divided categories, but an all-encompassing way to talk about everything you are. And they saw our human makeup as much more overlapping and integrated rather than these, pieces of pie
right,
that we divide them into.
right, right. Yeah, I'm constantly battling the okay, if I can get this area of my life right under control, then I can build on that to get this area of my life under control. And then it's like you try and snowball it into one one or two areas, when I want to say you might want to be able to try and take all of it into consideration and take it piece by piece that way. You know what I mean? If you can get all of it lined up, then it will get lined up,
Yeah, I think that's exactly what Jesus is getting at here, and what the Bible wants us to get is that if we look at this more as a whole rather than as just different pieces,
sure,
we're going to be way better off.
Right.
It's going to help us so much more to think about the whole thing rather than just parts of us. But it's so easy to do. Like say, oh man, it's the first of the year. I really got to get my physical life together. I've got to work out, hit the gym. I'm not giving myself enough time to exercise. And then, it's like, oh, my family is not getting the time they need. I need to really, spend more time with our kids, and with my spouse isn't getting enough time. I need to really carve out some date nights. And then we say, oh, work is, it's a time I got to really, this is big season at work. I really need to throw myself in at work. And so we're jumping from category to category to category. And then it feels like the other areas are getting cheated in the process.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So, but the Hebrew way of thinking wasn't that way. A quick understanding when Moses talked about the heart, that wasn't really the emotions so much the way that we think about it. It included the emotions, but it was also the mind. It was the center of your thinking. When he talked about your soul, it would have been your whole life being, your personhood. And when he talked about your strength, it's interesting. It wasn't just, working out of the gym, your physical strength, or even your actions, which is the way I've often thought about it. It's really even your possessions. It's what you have at your disposal. So it included your influence and your friendships and your wealth and your connections. Mm-hmm. But again, it wasn't meant to be all these distinct areas that we're supposed to think about. It's meant to be a way of saying, be all in, all that you have, all that you do, all that you feel, all that you think about, all that you say, every part of you, every relationship is an avenue for us to love God.
Right. Yeah, I think it was maybe that culture too at that time, everything was all together, right? Mm-hmm. You worked all together, you ate all together, you did everything together as a community. Mm-hmm. Where now we live in a very fast-paced community where it's very I-driven, where it's you have to, it's more internal. I feel like, now as a people, we're striving for community or connection or places where we find where we can belong. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where in those times, in those days, it was easier for them because they had to rely. The more people you had together, the less you were, the stronger you were, as a group. You know what I mean? Because then you wouldn't, if you had, somebody that wanted to take something from you, you're like, oh well, there's a lot of people over there. Maybe we won't do that. Where now it's we have to strive to be connected in all of those areas, but the value and the lesson that the Gospels are still teaching us is that it's still there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I lost my train of thought there, but I was saying in a way, it's those values of aligning our hearts and our minds and our souls and our strength is still there. Like that lesson is still there.
Yes.
You know?
It was a part of the culture back then. And so in that communal mindset of being together and being integrated, everything fitting together was just the way they operated.
Right.
It was easier in the sense that the culture reinforced it. Whereas in our culture, we are so independent and in many ways isolated. So we don't have that communal fabric that kind of holds us together and reinforces the integrated nature of all of this. But to your point, the Bible is still calling us to that. It's still calling us to that.
So true.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Gospels, Jesus, when he talks about the great commandment, he meant whole life devotion.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't just talking about individual compartments. He meant all that we are. Love God with all that we are. Let the love of God be the primary pursuit, our highest priority, and then to let these other things sort of draft into it. And that to me is why I say trying to be balanced is maybe not the best way to think about it, because in the end it kind of it breaks life into all these different categories rather than seeing the central focus of loving God in all that I do. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, because I think it's worth just going a little bit deeper into that. But again, the idea is that we need this holistic view of loving God. The bottom line is that we love God with everything we are, everything we have, every part of us. We're all in, and the reason I think this is important, the reason maybe we're spending some time on this, and I feel like it's a topic that we've sort of addressed periodically throughout the podcast, the first season especially, and maybe a little bit this season too. But I want to ask the question: how does loving God in a holistic way, this Hebrew mindset, rather than a compartmental way, this balanced Western mindset, make a practical difference in our lives? I think it really does. If we just go with the way that our culture reinforces, this Western mindset, then God ends up being just one of those pieces of pie in our life.
Yeah.
If you divide a pie into 8 pieces, or a pizza into 12 pizzas, you kind of have or maybe you need an extra large pizza with 16 slices, whatever your life demands. However you divide up your life, God just becomes one of those pieces of pizza.
So true. So true.
That's one of those quotes that probably, God is a piece of pizza in your life. Could be if so, that's just, don't use that sound bite as for this podcast, right?
I'm not going to use that one.
I mean, you could, I guess. Maybe people, what does he mean? God is a piece of pizza in your life. But he's just one of those categories, just one of those slices in your life, right? That's the Western mindset. And so the way you think about this, I have my spiritual life, which is church, prayer, Bible reading. That's one compartment. I have my work life, which is my career, my goals, my career goals, my vocational goals, my ambition, my income. And then we have our family life, which is my spouse, my kids, parenting, maybe extended relatives and family and friends. I've got my social life. That's another piece of the pie. Those are my friends and my recreation, my private life, which is, my inner thoughts, my emotions, my hobby, my alone time, my me time. And when we think about it that way, then loving God tends to be just one of those compartments. Yeah. One piece of pizza.
Right.
And it's just, it's mostly Sunday mornings and maybe your quiet time. Maybe you've got some moral behavior that you go, I'm going to draw the line here. But beyond that, those other areas aren't really influenced by God as much.
Right. My wife, to give her a little bit of a shout out on the pod. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she's kind of, it's our podcast, according to her last time. She goes, well, I can't remember what that was. We, okay, Amanda, yeah, you're on here once and suddenly, but she's a big part.
She's a big part.
So let's give her, give her a shout out.
No, she always says, like, every time I have like to go out to, have a game or something like that, she's always like, make Jesus proud. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, okay. Cause I feel like it puts me in the right mindset where it's like you're doing something that's competitive. You want to be good at it.
Yeah.
You want to not let your team down. So you want to, be mentally in the game, but in the back of my mind, I'm constantly going, make Jesus proud. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, it's just a game. This isn't, I'm not making it to the NHL, right? Mm-hmm. The show's not calling, you know what I mean? Like, but I can still represent Jesus in a way that if people did know me or not know me, that they would go, okay, he likes to compete, but there's a line that he won't cross. You know what I mean? Kind of thing.
And I love that because that's the idea that hockey is actually a part of your loving God.
Yes.
When you play hockey.
Yes.
I think that what revolutionized this for me was also sports.
Yeah.
Interesting enough.
Yeah.
Because I became a believer when I was in middle school. Didn't grow up in a Christian family, but became a Christian when I was in 8th grade. And then high school we moved away, and God was really on the back burner of my life. And I really kind of compartmentalized God at that point. He became just a single slice in my life. And then I added to that academics and athletics and friendships and dating and jobs and all those things were part of my life. And God didn't really cross over into any of those areas. Is my way of thinking.
Sure.
And it seemed normal to me. It seemed like, well, that's, you got your God life, and then you've got all these other areas of life as well. And this group called Athletes in Action came on campus, and there was a revival on our high school campus. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever been a part of. But it was just this idea of bringing Jesus into your sports life.
Sure.
It started with the football team, and they are young school. Our school was only 6 or 7 years old. Our high school, we had our first winning season ever in school history.
Nice.
And so everybody's going, what's going on? How come we're finally winning? And whether it was true or not, the rumor was, well, there's this club on campus called Athletes in Action, and these football players are praying before the games.
Right.
And suddenly everybody's like, really? And so then the cheerleaders were sort of interested in this too. And then I was a basketball player. So now we're like, well, we want to win, so we want to get involved in this, whatever this Athletes in Action thing was. And then some of the women's sports were, we want to get involved. And pretty soon it had nothing to do with sports, but, to me, it was just a light switch that came on when I realized God wanted to be a part of my sports.
Right.
That had never crossed my mind.
Right.
And I think it's because of our culture. We divide these things out. So it was just revolutionary for me that God wanted to be a part of my sports. Of course, that led to, this crisis of thinking, if that's true, then it means he wants to be a part of my dating life.
Right.
It means he wants to be a part of my academics. It means he wants to be a part of my friendships. It means he wants to be a part of everything.
Yeah.
So it's like, make Jesus proud.
Yeah.
In whatever I did.
Whatever you did. Yeah.
And I look back at some of the things, that they were teaching us. Like, there was this phrase called total release. I don't know if everybody's ever heard it out there, but Athletes in Action, it's like this little booklet that said, it didn't matter what was on the scoreboard. What mattered is you could be a winner if you played your best for God.
Right.
You could win the game, but if you didn't play your best for God and for His glory, then you in the end lost, even though the score says you won. And it was just a really a fresh way for me to think about that.
Right.
That radically changed my I point to that as one of the biggest directional shifts in my life.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, I it's one of those where even in my kids, not to stay on the sports topic a little bit, but my kids, in playing hockey and coaching and stuff, are the kids coach always says, because most kids at that point, they want to score goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody wants to score goals.
Yeah.
And the coach always says scoring goals is great, right? Everybody loves scoring goals. He goes, but he's like, what's even better is if you can get an assist for a goal, because you not only still get the same, at the end of the day, you still are on the board, right? You still get the chart of you getting a point for your team, but you also helped out a friend. And I'm just like, that simple lesson of putting yourself in that mindset of going, I'm going to help someone else achieve this great feeling of scoring a goal. That's even better. You know what I mean? And it's like, I love that of getting Jesus involved in every aspect of our life is way better than just compartmentalizing every aspect of our life,
Yeah. And we need to, this kind of discussion, we need to revisit it because so much of our culture reinforces the other.
Yes.
It's like I leave church and I leave God.
Right.
And nobody ever says that,
right?
But we act like it. It's
we
sort
do.
of like, okay, now it's on to the next thing,
right?
And I'll check in next week with God.
Yeah,
or you have your quiet time in
Sure.
the morning and you read, or the night, or whenever you do it, and you read a little bit of the Bible, and then you go, great, done talking to God for the day.
Right.
Got my God vitamin.
Right. It's like a checklist. Yeah.
And so here's I think the difference. The difference between each of these areas, I think, can be summarized this way. The difference between a compartmental view, which is the way our culture reinforces, or this holistic view, which is the biblical view. When you think about work, for example, if we work in a compartmental view, is secular. It's independent from God. I honor God on the weekends, and then let's say if you have a Monday through Friday work, then during the week, you focus on your career. It's secular versus sacred, and you divide the two. In a biblical view, work is a calling. It's your vocation. So we've talked about that on this podcast before. And you can work as unto the Lord. Think about parenting. Parenting, if you have a cultural view, it's just you raise kids with good morals. You want them to be good people.
Good citizens.
Good citizens. And I think if your faith can end up being just really moralistic, it can just be a lot of like, be good and do all these good things, but it's not really connected to loving God. It's just connecting to the rules. And being a good person, which often backfires in parenting. We can have a whole discussion about that. But if all your kids are getting is that being, growing up is just about being good,
right,
then that's going to backfire on you. Unless they see it in this sense of it's a avenue of loving God.
Right, for sure.
Living for God. But then parenting from a holistic view is... It incorporates loving God. The way you parent your kids is an expression of loving God.
Right.
The love that we've received from God is now. I often thought about it when our kids were younger, and even now, that I'm a conduit of God's love to them. That as God loves me, so He gives me the opportunity to love them.
Right.
Our emotional life. Faith is. In a compartmental view, faith is just about beliefs, and my emotions are personal and they're independent from God.
Sure.
Holistic view, loving God wants us to give Him how we feel as well, our pain as well as our joy. All of that He wants to be a part of. Time, we think of time as just sort of like in these slices. So, I have my time for God, which is church, and maybe your quiet time, and then the rest is my time.
Is mine. Yeah.
Like, this is my time.
Yeah.
Rather than this also is an opportunity for me, God, to love God. Rather than every moment can be an opportunity for us to live for God's glory. I like thinking about it with exercise and your body and your health. because that can be very compartmentalized. You go to the gym, you put on the headphones, you get in your own world, and it feels like you're miles away from everything else in your life, as well as miles away from God.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about if, the New Testament says, honor God with your body.
Yeah.
How about if that was also a way to love God?
Right.
It's not that he's anti-exercise. He just wants to be included in it.
Right. Yeah. I think so. I think it sets everything in motion, right? Like I think once you can start to get your mind in the right place and get your exercise in the right place and your strength and your soul, it's like, I think that's what the lesson there that Jesus was trying to teach us is that to center all of that, but to have him as the center of it all is the focus, right? If we align everything to point to him, then it's like, then we'll have a holistic and balanced life.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Let
loving God be the goal.
Yes.
That's my focus. That's what I'm trying to do. And then everything that life demands of us, and different seasons demand different things.
Yeah.
Even different days demand different things.
Sure.
But whatever life throws at me today, it's going to be an opportunity for me to love God.
Yes, for sure.
In the middle of that. And so I think of even our finances, your finances, we tend to think, well, I'll have a contribution that I'm going to give to the church. That's God's money. Everything else is my money.
Right.
Rather than saying all of it is his money.
Right.
And how does he want me to spend the other 90%, or how does he want me to spend that which I don't designate towards the kingdom work? How does he want me to spend that?
Right.
He cares about all of my decisions financially, and not just the part that I offer to him.
I remember to shout out one of our listeners. I remember there was listeners that were sending you videos of questions from their son.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
That was like
that hasn't happened for a while.
I know. We got to bring that back.
We need to bring that back. That was a cool thing.
But I love that aspect of just that mindset of asking, did God build the roads, or did God, just his little questions and how he was trying to put his world together, and having access to you.
Yeah.
I just thought that was so great. And that came to mind right now where, but God is our heavenly Father and wants us as his children to look to him for everything and to just have him be a part of every aspect of our life and to keep him at the center of it, and all the other questions that we have and all the things that we can go to God with, right? I think you said it on Sunday where, people were like writing things and like putting them on their hats or something, just always keeping it in mind. And yes, okay, that's a little silly and it's, a little funny, but in reality, I think that's kind of the feeling, not the feeling or the way we're supposed to focus our life is to keep God in the center of it, to keep him instead of in the back of our minds, to keep him in the front of our minds of everything that we do in our exercise and our health and our time, our time by ourselves, or our time with our children, our time as a family, all of that stuff,
So Ryan, this is what I found. I found in my life, and this was certainly true when this revolution of new thinking hit me in my senior year in high school, when I realized that God wanted to be part of my sports, and then that led to everything else. It was especially true back then, but it continues to be true to this day, is that, and I'm posing this for our listeners right now and viewers, is that I think a lot of times in our life we feel like we've given everything to God and we've included him in everything, and then we realize, oh wait, there's a whole nother area of my life that I've just hasn't even dawned on me to include him there too. And so maybe for our listeners right now, that's part of what's happening, is as we talk about all these different areas, you're starting to think, oh yeah, in theory, I want God to be involved in everything in my life, but in practice, it now is dawning on me that my work life or my family life or my personal life, my exercise life, my financial life, my decision making about this, my thinking on this one. I haven't even included God in that whatsoever.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that as an avenue to love God through what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that to me is part of the spiritual journey, as Jesus shows us more and more of what he wants to be involved in too.
Mm-hmm.
I love that Jesus stepped into Peter's boat, which was his career, his livelihood, his life. And then it says Jesus just stepped into Peter's boat. And he does that with us all the time. He just steps into our lives. He shows up right in the middle of what we thought was ours and we were responsible for, and it was up to us to figure out. And he's right in the middle of it. And he calms the storms, and sometimes he brings some storms before he calms them. But he is right there in the middle of every part of what we do. So that's, anyway, I think that to me is why this holistic view of loving God is so valuable, and how the balanced life might be overrated, because in the end, if you try and balance your life, you're just going to compartmentalize your life and cut it into a bunch of slices rather than, see the whole thing as focused and prioritized on loving God with all our heart.
Right.
Moses said in the Old Testament, Jesus, underscored it big time in the New Testament.
Yes,
the greatest part of our lives.
For sure. Yeah, I used to play at this church back in the day, and on the exit of their campus, they had a sign, and it says your mission starts now.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think about that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm driving in and out of places, where it's like, or I'm pulling out of my driveway, I always think, okay, here's the mission starts now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like all the lessons that we learn in church, now we have to apply them in our everyday life. Yeah. So I think about that.
I like that. I've seen that on churches too, where on the sign on the way out, it strikes me that it should be written on both sides of the signs.
Right.
Because on your way in, we have a mission too. Church isn't just for us to come and receive. We come and give too, and participate, and our mission continues.
Right.
It just never ends, and it's all of life, 24/7. All that we do, all that we encounter, and I bet more and more, this afternoon, this week, this month, for all of us, God will be revealing to us new areas that we can incorporate him into. Yeah. And sometimes those are like areas that we don't want him in. Let's just be honest. Sometimes for some people it's like, I know God wants to get into that part, step into that boat, and I don't want him in that boat. Yeah. I kind of like having my independence from God. And of course, I get it, but it's a false view of Jesus to think that him stepping in is going to make things worse. Yeah. He's only going to make things, it's only out of his love for us, his interest in us, that he wants to be a part of these things.
Yes.
He's going to integrate them in a way that's going to give so much more value and meaning and wholeness to our lives when he does.
Yeah. Well, when we keep even in our church, in our our marriages, if we can keep our relationships, if we can keep Jesus at the center of all of that, it's just the fruit that is gained from that. It's just, so much. You know?
And so that's instead of making that just theoretical, let's really make it practical. We start to bring it into all of those different areas.
For sure.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
I have a listener question.
Cool.
So I said, we got one. It actually came right out of this passage.
Sure.
So after I spoke on it, someone come up to me and said it, and he actually said, "I think this would be a good question for your podcast."
Okay. So I didn't get in trouble.
Uh-oh, what happened?
but a few weeks ago when we started doing listener questions, I sided with a wife. There was a husband and wife question.
Oh, did you hear back about that?
I heard from the husband.
Oh, see?
Because I sided with the wife.
Yeah, you did. I remember that.
And the husband came to me yesterday and he's like, "Bro, what's going on here?"
Well, we got to be honest. Let's just say we got to be honest.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
I was like, hey,
she was right.
She was bro, I love you, but your wife was right.
Your wife's right, and the sooner you realize it, the better off we all are.
I was like, why don't you, be right next time? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. If you were right, I would have said so.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, this one fortunately, this question does not we don't have to take sides here.
Okay, cool.
There's no sides on this one, so we're a little safer ground.
Sure.
It's kind of a technical question, actually. So in the passage that we looked at in the message, that it actually comes right before Moses saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. It says, Deuteronomy 6:3, it says, "Hear Israel and be careful to obey, that it's going to go well with you in the land." And he, I guess, apparently likes to make sense. He's got the Bible on his phone, and he looks at different translations.
Yeah.
So he just skips around from translation to kind of give him maybe a broader view of what the passage would mean. And he noticed that he says the King James Version says, "Be careful to observe,"
right,
not to obey. And he goes, that's a very different feel. Like observe, it's like observation, just to see these commands. Whereas, the passage that you use the New International Version, says to obey.
Right.
Goes, what's the deal? Is
Yeah.
it observe, or he didn't say what's the deal?
Right,
he knew it was obey.
Right.
He goes, but how come it says observe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked into it a little bit more.
Sure.
And he's right that King James does say observe, but actually more technically it says be careful, observe to do.
Right.
So it actually does have the idea of acting.
Yes.
It says observe to do.
Yes.
And then the NIV, the one that I usually use and the one we're reading today, is be careful to obey. The ESV, English Standard Version, says be careful to do them.
Right.
New American Standard Bible says be careful to do it. And so actually it turns out, for this listener question, when the King James Version says observe, it's actually the other translations are translating that with be careful. Not the obey part, but to be careful.
Right.
When they're saying be careful, that's how the King James says observe. Because then King James goes on to observe to do.
Right.
And the others say be careful to do or be careful to obey. Bottom line, all of the translations sort of reinforce the same thing, just saying them in different ways, that the commandments that God gave us, the massive batch of commandments in the Old Testament book, are meant for us to obey. And boy, talk about being compartmentalized. If you tried to take all of those, and you would run yourself ragged trying to keep every single commandment. And not that they're not supposed to instruct us and guide us and direct us, and to the degree that we can keep them, we should. But how much better to do what Moses instructed us, and that is the love of God, really then be the umbrella over all those commandments.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Pull them all together and integrate them together. And as we love God, I believe he drafts us in. So we can be careful to do them. And maybe we should think of careful in the sense of full of care. Full of care, full of love for God and for one another.
Yeah. I don't know who that the listener was for the question, but
I do.
I know you do. There's a great guy. Have you heard of him? His name is Wes Huff.
Wes Huff.
He has dedicated his life to studying old scrolls.
Okay.
From very, very long ago.
Yeah.
And he himself is a Christian, and he talks a lot about the different translations of the Bible. And like I said, he knows Hebrew and Greek and has dedicated his whole life, but he talks about those little differences.
Yeah.
And really interesting stuff. And I listen to a lot of his podcasts, and he goes on other people's podcasts and talks about this stuff, and really, really smart guy.
There you go.
But it's, Wes Huff. He's really, really smart, and he talks about the little differences of why they chose certain words and why they were curating. We've talked about that stuff too, but the curating for a certain audience and why they did this and why they did that, and really interesting.
Yeah, that stuff is fascinating.
It's really cool. Yeah. Really, really cool.
That's really fascinating. Well, there for our listener question, the listener who offered that, there's a resource for you. For
sure.
All of our listeners, actually, that's a great resource. But in the end, these different translations are helpful, and they kind of you start to see a theme developing between all of them. You kind of know you're on the right track.
Right.
I actually like the Message, which is often puts it in a little bit of a spicy way or whatever.
Sure.
But it kind of hits home. It says, "Listen obediently, Israel. Do what you're told." That gets to the point. It also sounds like maybe a parent would say.
I know. Can I change Israel to just any of my children's names?
Just insert child's name here. Listen obediently. Insert your child's name here. Do what you're told.
Do what you're told.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, all for the love and the glory of God, for sure. As we grow in our love for him, I think we love him more when we start to see how he permeates all that our life demands.
Very much
all
so.
that life includes.
Yes, very much so.
Both our pleasures as well as our pain. He steps into that boat.
Yes.
Hopefully this has been a helpful conversation for you as you've listened along. We're so grateful for our listeners and start to hear from them more and more, either in person or you can always leave us a comment.
Yeah.
If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a place for a comment, and we'll do our best to answer those. Even if it's just to let us know that this has been helpful, that really encourages us. If you're listening in an audio format, one of the podcast platforms out there, just send us an email at Unhurried podcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
You can also give us a question if you want to, and we'll try to answer it on our podcast.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And it also too, I know this might be a little inside baseball, but if anyone has any questions on where to find it, please email us or get in touch with us. I will literally install the app on your phone. So just let us know if you have any of those questions.
If they're having trouble finding this podcast.
Yeah. I talked to somebody yesterday that was having some trouble finding it or wasn't syncing on her phone. And so I just grabbed her phone and I said,
so
let me just do that for you right now.
But the people we're talking to have already found it.
Yes, so I know. That's what I'm saying. I wanted to throw that. It made me think about it yesterday because it literally just happened to me. So I was like,
Well, I've done that too. I'm like, hand me your phone.
Hand me your phone.
I will show you where you can find this.
Yeah, exactly.
I know some of our listeners are doing that too.
Yes, I know they are. Yes.
They're going, okay, I show them on their phone. They've told me they're doing that. So if you got someone that you want to share it with, maybe you just show them how to find it and how to subscribe, and you'll be able to follow along as well. Well, this is the message that this comes from, grew out of a message that was given on June 1st, 2025. It was called Keep It Simple Sheep. So you can find that at greenvalleychurch.com or on our Green Valley Church YouTube page. And of course, this has been just kind of a deeper dive into that. Ryan, thanks so much for being a part of the conversation. Thank you to our enthusiastic viewers and listeners as well.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, great. Well, until next time, this has been Unhurried with me, your host, Doug Kyle. Looking forward to talking to you soon.